I'm taking a little bit of a risk in filming this right now because we are awaiting the official confirmation that Milos Kerkez is finally a Liverpool player right now. So that may pop up on my phone while I'm filming this. It may even be confirmed while I'm editing it, so before it comes out. But I think it's safe to say that if that isn't the case, then this move is imminent, and it should be at least later today. And that would, of course, mean that Liverpool have now signed Jeremy Frimpong, Milos Kerkez and Florian Wirtz for a combined 186 million in total if all add-ons are triggered. So that is quite a hefty outlay. And of course, that being said, we all love transfers, don't we? And we know it's the big news in football. And so I guess the question is, even though we're only just getting that bit of transfer dopamine now from Milos Kerkez today, the big question on everyone's lips really is what comes next for Liverpool in this transfer window. We said that it was going to be a big one. It has already been a big transfer window for Liverpool, but there's so much scope for more to happen. So I really wanted to kind of look into that and examine what the next steps for Liverpool might be after those big outlays so far. And I guess the starting point for Liverpool really after this big outlay, as I say, is to start to recoup some money now. That's not a kind of sell to buy thing or anything like that, or pressure from the ownership. I guess, as a starting point, the squad is simply too big at the moment. I mean, they've got 18 non-homegrown players. The limit on that is, of course, 17 in a Premier League squad. They've got 3 left backs, 3 right backs if you include Calvin Ramsey, a big selection of central midfielders and attacking midfielders in particular. And we know that forward line is subject to change this summer, and that change is definitely coming. So how is this all going to play out, and where are the big moves and what's important next as Liverpool move through this transfer market? And I guess I'll start really with Darwin Nunez, because he is a little bit of an obvious one really now. It is my understanding that Napoli are now leading the chase for his signature. That Saudi interest that was there in January and maybe a bit earlier in the summer with one eye on the kind of Club World Cup, that seems to be fading now. We're not in a position, and I'd love to offer certainty, but it is the transfer market. Got to be careful about that. I don't think we're in a position where we can rule out Saudi entirely, but I'm told that Napoli are not only keen, but also the player is quite keen on that move to Naples and would be open to that idea. For me personally, I think it does seem a good fit, Nunez, with Napoli, really. Their fan base, the passion there that they show. I think he would really fit in and be loved by the fans, in Naples. So talks are kind of ongoing. We're in the early stages of those talks, and I have had some kind of loose information. This is not something I would hang my hat on completely, but I had a conversation yesterday that suggested Napoli were willing to go up to around 55 million euros, which is around 47 million pounds. Obviously that is not the kind of figures that were being touted when Al Hilal was showing real interest in Nunez. It was more towards the kind of 60, 65, 70 million mark. Obviously a lot higher, and there's a lot more money floating around in the Saudi Pro League, isn't there? But I still don't think that's too bad if Liverpool can get close to that 50 million pounds mark, judging by what they've got left on the contract, etc. I don't think that would be bad in terms of cutting the losses. And you have to say it, of course, he's a striker who he's had a difficult time at Liverpool, but he's, of course, he's still scored some goals, 40 in 143 appearances for Liverpool. A lot of those off the bench as well, by the way, because he's not quite been trusted. And I think, if he did go to Serie A, I think he would score goals there. I think he would cause problems for defences, and we know he's got a great work rate as well. And you look at someone like Scott McTominay, didn't quite work out for him at Manchester United, has gone over there and absolutely thrived in Naples. And the hope will be for Darwin Nunez that he can do something similar in, of course, what is clearly a weaker league, and maybe a league that will maybe suit his qualities a bit more. So as I say, kind of in the early stages of talks there between Napoli and Liverpool. Wouldn't be quite saying it's talks towards a final transfer, but early exploratory talks are ongoing, so we'll see how that one plays out. Now, in terms of other movement in the forward line, of course, a big talking point is Luis Diaz and his future. Still nothing hugely solid on this one in terms of movement. Now, we're seeing reports, aren't we? And I can't vouch for this personally, I don't cover Barcelona, but we are seeing a lot of reports around Barcelona's interest in Nico Williams at Athletic Bilbao. Now, you would think they've been put up as, haven't they, as a real strong contender for Luis Diaz, but of course if they're turning their attentions to another left winger, it doesn't look like they think that a deal is feasible for Luis Diaz. There is still that interest from Saudi Arabia. Al Nassr, one of the teams who are keen. We will have to see how that plays out. Again, nothing concrete on that in terms of an offer coming in or anything like that. So we're not at the stage where that kind of thing will happen. So, you just got to kind of, I guess, wait and see really with Luis Diaz's situation. But there is, as I say, there is some keenness there on the Saudi side. So it's all about whether they firm that up. And, I think one crucial factor here is, as much as people kind of want to say Luis Diaz is halfway out the door, etc., I don't really agree with that. They won't give him away, Liverpool, this summer. He's versatile. He was very, very good last season. And he works his socks off, doesn't he? So they're not going to be accepting a low transfer fee for a player of Luis Diaz's quality. That is a crucial point to remember. So it's up to to give them a decision to make in that position. The offer's got to come in and the offer's got to be good. And at the moment, Saudi looks like the likeliest place for that offer to come from, but nothing quite happening on that yet. And in terms of other forwards, Federico Chiesa seems an obvious one to go as well, doesn't he? There's nothing hugely solid. There was some interest from Napoli early in the window. That seems to have quietened down a little bit, was never as advanced as some of the reports coming out of Italy suggested. But there is an expectation on the Liverpool side that there's going to be interest from Italian clubs in taking him back. Now, whether that will be on a permanent or a loan, and Liverpool would just have to kind of cut the losses and accept a loan later in the window, we will have to see. But I would say that I'd be quite surprised if Federico Chiesa is still at Liverpool at the end of this summer transfer window. So that is one definitely to kind of keep an eye on in terms of developments, and I think very much forms part of the plans going forward in terms of what comes next for Liverpool in this window. Now, away from the forwards, I'm going to move into the back line now and talk a little bit about Andy Robertson. Now, of course, I spoke in my last transfer update about the Atletico interest, and that is still there, very much so. They've just been knocked out of the Club World Cup, of course, but the key aspect here is not really them freeing themselves up to do this transfer now they're out the Club World Cup. It's more on the player, really, and what his decision looks like. Now, I'm told he's on holiday at the moment, really, and kind of mulling things over and having to think about whether he does want to make this move or not, because of course it is a big move to go to Spain, to take your young family out there, isn't it? So he is currently weighing that up. But if he does decide he wants to go, he wants the new experience, then it'll be up to Atletico to come and firm that interest up. There's been kind of, again, some kind of sort of exploratory talks there around what a deal might look like. So Atletico are aware of where Liverpool is standing in terms of what they want, but as I say, it's up to the player to give the green light there, and then if he does, then things will start to move forward. And of course, Liverpool won't necessarily be looking directly for a replacement left back at that moment, will they? Because they've just signed, or they're just about to sign, Milos Kerkez. But then, of course, question marks over Kostas Tsimikas. That starts to build. Can they bring in another left back? So left back is a really interesting one. But as I say, in terms of concrete information at the moment, we're just waiting for something a bit more solid on Robertson and his final decision on whether he wants to go or not. Now, of course, those outgoings are massively important now, just to get some money back in through the door, just to free up some spaces in the squad. But of course, once that happens, then Liverpool can start to spend again, and that is the expectation, is that they will, once some more of those squad spaces are freed up. Now, we spoke about the forward line and what might happen there in terms of those sales, and I would say Nunez and Diaz, huge possibility that they would depart this summer. Now, of course, if that goes, you need to bring in some more forwards to replace them, and who might that be? Now, I'm seeing an awful lot of talk about Alexander Isak on my timeline on Twitter, all across YouTube, or all across social media in general. Of course, it's the name on everybody's lips, isn't it? And I do want to kind of talk about that here. I'm really wary when I kind of talk about this link. I haven't done a transfer update mentioning Isak before, because I don't want to be accused of kind of clickbait or anything like that, or kind of getting anyone's hopes up. And the reason I kind of pitch it like that is because I do still think that this is, a very much an aspirational target for Liverpool this summer. I mean, there's no question, as a starting point on this, there's absolutely, he is admired by Liverpool. He's very much a player they like. Of course he is. He's absolutely world class, isn't he? And I would say nobody at Liverpool is kind of coming down on this in a firm way and saying this absolutely cannot happen. So I would be silly to kind of sit here and rule it out, particularly as mad things can happen in football. But I just do want to kind of give a little bit of an opinion here, if you'll allow me to, in terms of the likelihood of this one, and I still kind of fall on the side of scepticism. I hope I'm not kind of raining on anyone's parade in saying that, but I just think, look, he's got 3 years left on his contract. That's not quite decision time, is it? Newcastle have just secured Champions League football, so that should ease any kind of PSR concerns. They're certainly not in the position they were then when they nearly sold Anthony Gordon to Liverpool. They just won a trophy, so it looks like an exciting project at the time. Certainly not a place you could say, oh, it's absolutely terrible to still be here, and that Isak will be desperate to get out of. So there's all these things there that are just putting you in a position where you're thinking, how likely are Newcastle to really want to strike a deal in this window? Can they not just get one more season at least out of Isak there, and would that really put paid to any ideas that Liverpool might have of striking a deal? In my opinion, I find this one still very unlikely, but as I say, I won't be ruling it out just yet, because you can get your fingers burnt doing that, and he is definitely, I know this from sources, a player that is really, really liked for many obvious reasons, but a lot has got to come together for Liverpool. Not least in terms of sales as well, because they've got to raise a decent chunk of money for something like that kind of deal to be doable for them. So decent money for Nunez, decent money for Diaz, maybe even a permanent sale for Chiesa as well, to be able to revisit that and go for someone like Isak. So let's kind of keep an eye on that, but I'm a little sceptical. In my opinion, in my view as a journalist who's covered this club for a while, it's one I find a little bit hard to see, but I've been wrong many times in the past, so we'll see how it goes on that. Now, of course, if it isn't Isak, Liverpool will still probably need a forward, won't they? As I say, Nunez very likely to go, and they need someone. That central role has been a real talking point, and a potential alternative in terms of next step, of course, is Hugo Ekitike, who's at Eintracht Frankfurt now. I can say, there's definitely been contact on the player's side, but it is a little bit quiet at the moment in terms of this. Not just in terms of course, him coming to Liverpool, but I note that the interest from other clubs, particularly Chelsea, seems to have gone quiet on this front. Just makes you kind of wonder whether he's been told to kind of sit in there and hold tight till things move, maybe by Liverpool, maybe by somebody else. I am just speculating a little bit there, but as I say, definitely a player they've liked. But there's a lot of players that would come on their radar that they would like, who they don't eventually move for. So, it wouldn't take that as kind of gospel. He's the target, but he's definitely someone who's kind of, they may eventually decide to go for. I think, obviously, the key here, as with Isak, can they move on Nunez? Can they free up that spot there? And then maybe this is one they pull the trigger on. But beyond them being, half keen, having made some contact, at least explored what a deal might look like, nothing major on that one, but just that is one we'll see how that develops. Of course, it's not just forwards they're going to be looking at as well. We know at the back that they're going to need reinforcements. Quants are very close to securing that move to Bayer Leverkusen, so you're going to need to strengthen there. Marc Guehi, that interest exists. I've done a video yesterday on my channel, which I would urge you to watch, kind of doing a deep dive into his numbers. The key really to a deal here really is what Crystal Palace kind of say in terms of what their expectations are. Are they demanding a huge fee? Are they willing to lose him on a free regardless so he can play for them in Europe? That's a key part of it, because Liverpool won't do a deal at an excessive fee, and we know Palace stuck to the guns when Newcastle were interested last season, didn't they? Or last summer, sorry. So it'd be interesting to see what Crystal Palace are demanding and whether that's something that Liverpool see as realistic. And also, he will want guarantees over his role. How much will he play? Will he play more than Quansah did last season? That will be important as a selling point to the play. So that's where we are at the moment. That's not moving forward at particularly quick pace, but that can change, of course. If you get the guarantees from Palace around the fee, if you get the guarantees from Guehi that he's happy with the role that's being offered to him, then that can move forward very quickly. But as I record this, it's still kind of tentative interest at the moment and being explored. So we'll see how that goes. And another name I quickly want to mention, actually, at centre half that's been mentioned recently is Castello Lukeba at RB Leipzig. I spoke to kind of people close to him, sources close to his camp over the last couple of days, and no firm approach yet from Liverpool. But as I say, that can definitely change. We know that RB Leipzig have been watched by Liverpool regularly. He may be someone who's on the radar, but as I say, right now, as things stand, the last couple of days, certainly no contact there. So we'll see whether that changed, because he is definitely a player of interest. But I think that's giving you a kind of a summary of where Liverpool are up to in terms of departures, in terms of what they might be doing in incomings. But I think it all rides. I think the key point to make here really is a lot rides on departures, doesn't it? For those, the reinforcements to be made at centre back, for reinforcements in the forward line. I think it's key now that some departures are sealed and Liverpool move forward with that. And then they can get into kind of the second phase of this approach to the transfer market, which will be then plugging the gaps throughout the squad, which means it's going to be an even bigger summer by the end of it. So much more to come. It's very, very exciting to cover, I must say. Certainly after last summer, which was incredibly quiet. It should be a lot more of these transfer updates as a direct result of that, so I'm very much looking forward to that. But do let me know your thoughts on all the talking points in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on those departures, who you would ideally like to see Liverpool add. Is there any concrete links you've seen out there that you think are particularly interesting? Do let me know your thoughts on that, and if you can like and subscribe, it'd be massively appreciated, and I'll see you guys very soon.